Arizona Territory, late spring of 1876. The sun was already high and hot by the time Lorne rode into the clearing and saw her. She was tied to a tree, rope bruising her wrists, her dress torn at the hem, dust streaking her cheeks. A woman, bound alone like some outlaw prize while the wind stirred the mesquite branches and buzzards circled overhead. Isaac's horse snorted, uneasy. He dismounted slow, boots crunching over dry, cracked ground. The woman's eyes locked on him, not scared, not begging, just furious. "What in God's name?" he muttered, staring at the rope digging into her arms. "Do not untie me if you plan to send me back," she said, voice hoarse but steady. Isaac narrowed his eyes. "Who tied you here?" "Men from the settlement east of the ridge. Said I was cursed. Said I lay with someone I shouldn't have." Her jaw tensed. "He was an Apache warrior. We loved each other. That was enough for them." Isaac stepped closer, studying the thick welts across her wrists. She looked about 22, 23. Her brown hair was tangled, but her back was straight. Proud, she did not shrink under his gaze. "What's your name?" he asked. "Paloma Briggs," he nodded. "Isaac Lorne. I am not with them. I was headed toward the Verde River looking for work. They left me here to die," she said simply. "I do not need your pity." "Well," Isaac said, drawing his knife, "good thing I am not offering any." She flinched when the blade came close, but he was careful. He cut the rope clean, catching her when she stumbled forward. Her knees nearly buckled, and he gripped her arms steady. Paloma pulled away a moment later, still proud, still angry. "They said I defiled myself, that I was less than dirt for loving a warrior." Isaac met her gaze. "I do not care who you loved before." Paloma blinked. Her mouth parted, but no words came. Isaac turned toward his horse. "Come on. You need water, food, someplace better than this." Paloma hesitated only a moment before following. They camped that night beneath a rocky outcrop near a shallow stream. Isaac built the fire. Paloma sat wrapped in his spare blanket, cradling the tin cup he handed her. She drank slow, eyes distant. "He was kind," she said after a while, voice soft. "His name was Colo. He taught me to track deer, how to read the wind. I met him when I was 16. We kept meeting in secret. Then 3 weeks ago they found out." Isaac nodded. He did not pry, he just listened. "I never thought they'd tie me to a tree like an animal," Paloma whispered. Isaac glanced over. "You are not an animal." She met his eyes. There was something brittle there behind her calm. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. "Because no one else did," Isaac said. A long silence stretched between them. The fire cracked softly. Paloma leaned back on her elbows, eyes on the stars. "I do not have anywhere left to go." Isaac looked at her, really looked, the strength in her shoulders, the old bruises on her skin, the quiet fire in her expression. "Not broken. Just battered." "I am heading west," he said. "Work near Prescott, ranch hand job, not much, but you could come with me if you want." She studied him, wary. "You do not know me." "I know enough." Paloma stared at the flames. Then she nodded just once. They rode side by side the next morning. Isaac had given her his canteen and an old hat to keep the sun off. She asked about his life, born in Kansas, orphaned at 12, drifted west. He had worked cattle, driven freight wagons, fought off more than one ambush on the trail. "Why are you alone?" she asked. Isaac shrugged. "Never found the right reason to stop." She was quiet after that. 2 days passed. Then 3. They reached the edge of Prescott Territory. Isaac found them a place to stay, a small cabin owned by a friend, empty since winter. Just one room and a lean-to barn, but it had a roof and a well. He offered her the bed. Took the floor without question. Paloma did not argue, but that first night she stood in the doorway for a long time, watching him roll out his blanket. Something in her face had changed. Less guarded. Softer. "Thank you," she said. He looked up. You never have to thank me for treating you like a person, she smiled. Just a little. Days turned to weeks. Paloma helped around the ranch while Isaac worked cattle runs. She was sharp, quick with horses, and even quicker with fixing broken things. She never spoke about Colo again, but sometimes Isaac would catch her looking out toward the hills, eyes far away. He never pushed, but he stayed near. One night after supper, she handed him a tin plate and their fingers brushed. She did not pull away. "You are not like other men," she said. Isaac tilted his head. "No, you do not look at me like I am ruined." Isaac set the plate down. "Because you are not." Her eyes flicked to his, searching. Then she reached out slow, cautious, and touched his hand. "I feel safe when you are near," she said. He turned his palm over, wrapped their fingers together. "I want you to stay," he said. "With me." Paloma's breath hitched. "Even if I loved someone before," Isaac moved closer. "I do not care who you loved before, Paloma. What matters is who you love now." Her eyes welled. She leaned in, forehead resting against his. "I think I am starting to fall in love with you," she whispered. Isaac smiled, pressed a gentle kiss to her brow. "Then we are on the same trail." And for the first time in a long while, Paloma let herself believe in love again. The rains came late that year, but when they did, they turned the dry soil into something living again. The high grass along the north ridge reached Isaac's knees by early summer, and the creek behind the cabin ran full enough to draw mule deer down in the early hours. The land was shifting, and so were they. Paloma had taken to rising before first light, washing her face with cold water from the bucket, braiding her hair behind her neck. She worked beside him now, not just at the cabin but out on the land mending tack, checking fence lines, helping him drive the cattle up to the higher pastures where the heat didn't press so hard. One morning, as they rode out with the sun still low, she pointed toward a cluster of dark clouds gathering along the Mogollon rim. "That's monsoon," she said. "The lightning'll spook the herd if we don't watch them close." Isaac glanced over at her. "You always read the sky like that," Colo taught me. She nudged her horse forward. "He said the clouds lie less than men do." Isaac didn't answer right away. He watched her silhouette against the pale sky, the way she sat easy in the saddle, not like someone learning, but someone remembering. "You ever think about going back?" he asked, careful with the question. "No." She didn't look over. "I buried what was left of him near the old trail behind Granite Bluff. I said goodbye." He nodded once. That was enough. They turned the herd slow that afternoon, keeping them close to the tree line. Paloma rode wide, her voice low and calm when she guided the cattle. No whip, no noise, just presence. She moved like someone who had learned to stay small to survive, but was learning now she didn't have to. By dusk, they'd gotten the herd to the upper pasture. Isaac built a small cook fire while Paloma unpacked the tin of beans and salt pork from her saddlebag. The sky had gone violet, the first stars blinking through. She handed him a plate, then sat cross-legged opposite him, hat set beside her, hands stained with dust and iron. "My father was a blacksmith," she said, out of nowhere. Isaac looked up. He kept to himself. Didn't like the church folk much. Said they liked rules better than truth. Isaac swallowed a bite. "He's still alive," she shook her head. "Died of fever when I was 15. My mother remarried 2 months after, to a man who drank more than he prayed." Isaac didn't ask more. He didn't have to. Paloma picked at her bootlace. "I kept waiting for someone to say I mattered. Not for what I did or didn't do, just for being me." "You ever hear it?" he asked. She looked at him then. "Not until you." They didn't speak the rest of the meal. The fire crackled low and the cattle shifted in the tall grass, their hooves soft against the earth. When she stood to bed down her horse, Isaac followed. She turned at the barn door, brushing a hand against the edge of his shirt sleeve. "You're steady," she said. Not kind like a preacher, not sweet like a boy, just steady, he nodded. I'll take that. She leaned in, slow, like testing a current before stepping into a river. Her lips brushed his jaw, not quite a kiss, more a promise. Then she stepped back. I'll sleep better knowing you're under the same roof, she said. And she did. That night she didn't watch the window, didn't keep her boots close to the bed like she might need to run. She slept with her back to the door and her face turned toward him. 3 days later they rode into town for supplies. Prescott had grown since Isaac's last visit. More rail talk, more strangers. Paloma kept her shoulders squared, skirts clean, eyes level. But when they passed the general store, a man stepped out onto the walk and blocked their path. Well, look what the high desert dragged back, he said, voice oiled with mockery. Paloma's hands went still on the reins. Isaac stepped forward. Something you need, the man's mouth twitched. Just surprised to see her walking free. Thought we left her for the coyotes. Isaac didn't flinch. You left a woman to die. That's what cowards do. The man laughed, but it didn't reach his eyes. You think she's clean now, think she forgot what she did. Paloma's voice cut through before Isaac could answer. I didn't forget. I remember everything. I remember how he treated me better than any man in this town. I remember how none of you had the courage to understand love that looked different. The man's face darkened. Isaac stepped between them. If you speak to her again, you won't like what follows. They left with flour, coffee, and a new saddle strap. Paloma didn't say a word until they were halfway back to the cabin. I thought I'd freeze when I saw him, she said. But I didn't. You didn't need me to stand up for you, Isaac said. No, she agreed. But you did, and I won't forget it. That night, as the wind stirred through the cottonwood leaves, she reached for his hand beneath the quilt, not out of fear, out of choice. Say it again, she whispered. What? That you don't care who I loved before. Isaac turned to her, his voice quiet and sure. I care who you love now. She closed her eyes, her breath steady against his shoulder, and for the first time it felt like home. By mid-July, the cottonwoods along the creek had gone thick with leaf, and the heat settled over the land like a heavy blanket. Days passed slow and honest early rides, fence work, meals cooked over the coals, and long evenings where neither Isaac nor Paloma felt the need to fill the silence. The cabin, though small, had taken on a rhythm. Paloma started tending a patch of garden behind the shed where the soil held more moisture. She planted corn and beans, coaxed them up with quiet patience and a practiced hand. Isaac repaired the porch steps, built a second stool when her knees started aching from crouching too long. They didn't speak about what they were building between them, but it was clear in the way their days wove together. One evening, as twilight cooled the air, Paloma leaned against the doorframe and watched Isaac mend a bridle strap. The leather was worn thin, but his hands worked it with care, his fingers stained with oil and dust. You ever think about owning land? She asked. He didn't look up right away. Used to. Back when I thought it meant something more than just dirt and taxes. What changed? He shrugged. Had no one to share it with. Figured drifting was easier than planting roots just to watch them die. Paloma stepped down onto the packed earth. I know what it's like to keep moving so you don't have to feel the weight of staying. Isaac set the bridle down. You feel that weight now, she nodded. But it doesn't scare me like it used to. The moon rose slow behind her shoulder, casting a pale light across her cheek. Isaac stood, brushing his hands on his trousers. I've got some savings. Enough to maybe buy a parcel north of the ridge. Water runs up there even in dry months. Paloma's brow lifted. You thinking of settling? I'm thinking I don't want to build a life unless it's with you. Her breath caught, but she didn't look away. You'd tie yourself to a woman folks say is cursed. I'd tie myself to a woman who's walked through fire and still stands straight. Paloma stepped close enough to rest her palm against his chest. Then we'd build it together. That night, they sat out on the porch with a jug of cooled creek water between them. The coyotes howled far off, and the wind carried the scent of mesquite and dry grass. Paloma leaned her head against his shoulder without a word. In the morning, they rode up to the ridge, just the two of them, and an old survey map Isaac had borrowed. The land he spoke of was rough in places, but it opened wide and green where the pines thinned, and a spring bubbled clear from the stones. Paloma knelt beside it and dipped her fingers in. "It's good water," she said. He crouched beside her. "It's ours if you want it." She looked out over the open space, the line of cottonwoods in the distance and the slow flight of a hawk overhead. "I want it," she said. Isaac reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a folded paper signed already with his name, ready to be filed in town. He handed it to her without ceremony. I left the second line blank. Paloma traced the space with her thumb. "You asking me to sign it? I'm asking you to help me make something that lasts." She looked up at him, eyes shining but steady. "Then I'll sign it, not because I need land. Because I choose you." They rode back with the paper tucked safe between them, and when they reached the cabin, she unpacked the flour sack and set to kneading dough. Isaac chopped wood for the stove, and they worked without talking, without needing to. That evening, as the bread rose and the fire glowed warm in the hearth, Isaac reached across the table and took her hand. "No one's gonna take you from here," he said. "Not again." "I know," she said. "I'm not afraid anymore." Later, when they lay down in the bed they now shared, Paloma turned toward him, her voice low in the dark. "There's something I never told you." Isaac waited, his hand resting gentle at her waist. "I was going to marry him. Colo. We had a place picked out near where the stones rise like teeth in the desert, but the world wasn't ready to let us live quiet." Isaac's voice was steady. "I won't ask you to forget him." "I don't want to forget," she said, "but I want to love again, and I do." "I love you." Isaac kissed her temple, slow and sure. "Then that's all we need." Outside, the wind shifted. A monsoon cloud broke open across the far hills, and the scent of rain drifted in. Paloma pulled the quilt up over them, her fingers laced with his. And they slept, knowing the storm had passed them by. The land grant came through before August had burned the last green from the hills. A man from the county office rode out with the final papers tucked in a leather folio, and Isaac signed with his left hand resting lightly on Paloma's shoulder. She signed next, her name written in the same careful script she'd used when she etched her father's name into a headstone made from river stone. After the man rode off, they stood beneath the shade of the juniper tree by the creek and said nothing for a long while. The land was theirs now, but it didn't change the way the wind moved through the grass, or how the sky stretched wide enough to hold every kind of silence. What changed was inside them. Paloma broke the quiet first. "I want to build something that doesn't need hiding." Isaac tilted his hat back. "Then we'll raise it beam by beam and let the whole world see." They started with a foundation. Isaac hauled limestone from the ridge, and Paloma laid each stone herself, her palms raw by the third day. She refused gloves, said she wanted to feel the weight of it, to know this place would never be taken from her. Isaac didn't argue. He just worked beside her, his shirt soaked through before noon most days. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the walls of the new cabin rose waist-high, she brought out 2 tin cups and a jug of elderflower cordial they'd traded for in town. They sat on the stacked lumber and let the breeze cool their skin. "I used to think peace was just the space between running," she said. Isaac sipped slow. "And now I think peace is a place you can put your hands on." He looked at her, the curve of her jaw catching the last of the light. You think you'll stay when winter comes. I'll stay when the roof leaks, when the beans don't sprout, when you wake with your back aching from too much work." She turned to face him fully. "I'll stay because staying is a choice I get to make now." That night, she reached into the cedar box beneath the bed and pulled out a folded scrap of cotton. Inside was a silver earring, shaped like a feather, blackened at the edges with age. She set it on the table between them. "I kept one," she said, "from Kolo." Isaac looked at it, then at her. "You don't owe me an explanation. I'm not giving one. I'm telling you I still carry love, but not the same way as before. It doesn't take from what I feel for you," he nodded once. "Then keep it. Love that's real doesn't need forgetting." She smiled, faint and certain, and returned it to the cloth. The next morning, Isaac rode out toward Ash Creek to barter for lumber. Paloma stayed behind to tend the garden and patch the roof of the tool shed. A rider came mid-afternoon, a young woman with dust on her hem and a letter folded tight in her palm. She handed it to Paloma without a word and rode off before questions could be asked. Paloma unfolded the letter at the table. It was written in uneven English, but it was clear enough. Kolo's younger brother, Tosa, had made it as far north as the Verde Valley. He'd survived the same raid that had taken Kolo's life. He'd heard Paloma was alive. When Isaac returned that evening, she handed him the letter. "You going to see him?" he asked after reading it twice. "I think I have to," he nodded. "Then I'll ride with you." She looked down at her hands. "You don't feel threatened?" "I feel honored," he said. "You're letting me ride beside every part of your life, not just the easy ones." They made the trip 2 days later, the trail winding through dry ravines and past mesquite thickets where the wind spoke in tongues older than English. They found Tosa in a low tent near a stream bed, his hair streaked with gray though his face was still young. He stood when he saw Paloma, and they embraced without words. Isaac waded back, hands folded, watching the way grief and joy lived together in their faces. Tosa spoke little, but he gave her a small bundle wrapped in deer hide. Inside was a carved pendant, the one Kolo had worn at his throat, shaped like a hawk's wing. Paloma pressed it to her chest and closed her eyes. "Thank you," she said. They rode home in silence, the kind that didn't need filling. She didn't cry, she didn't speak of what they'd shared. But that night she hung the pendant on the nail beside the door just above Isaac's bridle. He watched her from the table. "You all right? I'm whole," she said. Isaac stood and crossed the room. He rested his hand on her back, right between her shoulder blades. "That's all I ever wanted for you." She turned and kissed him, slow and sure. "And I want everything with you, all of it. The hard years, the lean ones, the ones where the roof might sag and the cattle might wander." Isaac smiled, eyes soft. "Then we're already rich," and they were. Not in coin, but in the quiet knowledge that nothing behind them could change what they were building now. The cabin would rise. The land would hold them. And their love, weathered, earned, and steady, would not be moved. The first frost came early, curling the edges of the corn leaves and painting the porch rail with a thin silver that crackled beneath their fingers at dawn. Isaac had just finished the chimney stonework on the new cabin, and Paloma had begun stitching thick curtains from burlap sacks, her needle steady even when the wind howled through the rafters. The cabin stood now, full height, with a door that shut true and a hearth that held heat through the night. It wasn't grand, but it was theirs, built with sweat and time, timber by timber. The small patch of land behind it had taken to the turn of seasons, and the soil bore winter greens, onions, and the rough beginnings of carrots. Paloma kept a ledger in the back of her recipe book, marking the yield and the seed types by hand. One overcast morning, Isaac returned from the high pasture later than usual, eyes rimmed red with dust. He unsaddled his horse and paused in the barn, silent long enough for Paloma to step out and find him leaning against the stall, staring at the ground. "Something wrong?" she asked, wiping her hands on her apron. "Found a calf dead. Bobcat by the looks of it, young one, bold." She stood beside him, her voice even. "We'll hang iron chimes from the north fence, sound'll keep it off." He glanced over, surprised. "You've done that before. Once, in the canyon country east of here. Worked well enough." Isaac nodded. "We'll do it tomorrow." He didn't speak again until they were inside and the kettle hissed over the fire. Then, without looking up, he said, "I've been thinking about the ridge behind the cabin. There's a flat patch near the cedar stand." Paloma poured water into 2 tin cups. "You want to build something else?" He took the cup and warmed his hands around it. "I want to ask if you'd marry me up there. Nothing fancy. Just us and that high place and maybe Tosa if we can get word to him." Paloma didn't answer right away. She sat beside him, folding her legs beneath her. The firelight caught the line of her cheek as she turned toward him. "I thought I'd never be asked that again." "Not truly. I mean it," he said. "Not for how it looks or who approves, just because I want to share all my winters with you." She laid her hand over his. "Then let's do it before the snow sets in." They sent word with a peddler who passed through 3 days later. Tosa arrived on horseback the next week, his saddle worn and his coat patched at the elbows. He brought with him a small carved bowl and a pouch of river stones, saying they were meant for blessings and grounding. He didn't say much else, only clasped Paloma's hand in both of his and nodded to Isaac like he already knew the measure of him. The morning of the ceremony, the wind was still, and the sky pale with cold. Paloma wore a dress she'd dyed herself, deep blue from crushed berries and faded cotton, the sleeves trimmed with lace she'd kept from her mother's old sewing box. Isaac wore his cleanest shirt and the boots he'd saved from his days working freight. They said their vows beneath the cedar, no preacher, no witnesses but Tosa and the hawks circling high. Isaac promised only what he could keep: patience, steadiness, and a quiet place to return to. Paloma promised presence, truth, and to hold the line between memory and future with gentleness. Tosa placed the stones in a circle at their feet, murmuring in his own tongue before stepping back. Afterward, they shared bread and dried peaches beneath the trees, and when the sun reached its highest point, Isaac took Paloma's hand and led her down the ridge, back toward the cabin that now bore both their names carved into the lintel. Winter settled in earnest not long after. Snow fell in fits, sometimes soft, sometimes driven sideways by wind that rattled the shutters. Inside, the cabin held steady. Paloma hung dried herbs from the rafters and taught Isaac how to knit a proper row. He fumbled through his first scarf, cursing the yarn under his breath, but when she wore it out to the barn one morning, her cheeks red from the cold. He said he'd never made anything finer. They passed the dark months with small rituals, reading aloud by lamplight, mending tack, cooking meals from the root cellar, and trading stories that neither had told before. One night, while the wind moaned low and distant, Paloma said, "I used to think love had to be loud to be real. But this—" She gestured to the fire to him. "This is quiet as breath, and just as needed." Isaac reached across the quilt and brushed a strand of her hair behind her ear. "I used to think love had to be earned by being someone different than I was." She leaned into his touch. "But we didn't change for each other." "No," he said. "We just stopped hiding." In the spring, the garden returned with more color than before. The hawks still circled the ridge, and the iron chimes they hung from the fence kept the bobcat at bay. They built a second shed near the creek, and talked sometimes of adding a lean-to for a milk goat, maybe even a second horse when the money allowed. Tosa came back through in late March, stayed 2 nights, and left with a new blanket Paloma had woven and a promise to return before harvest. By the time the wildflowers pushed through the thawed earth, Isaac and Paloma had found a rhythm so even it needed no speaking. Their love was not a thing that blazed, but a fire that never went out, kept fed by small acts, quiet care, and the kind of trust that could only be built over time, through hardship and in the open. They never left the land. The cabin stood through every storm. And for the rest of their days, Isaac and Paloma Lorne woke each morning to the sound of wind in the cottonwoods, and the feel of each other's steady presence beside them, two souls no longer drifting, bound not by what they had lost, but by what they had built together.